You ready, Miss Kayla? Good evening, everybody. That was anemic. And all of you here had food and drink, so that should not have been anemic unless your mouth was full. That was your only excuse. So let's try that again. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. That was so much better. Welcome to the last of our 2024 Sotterley Presents People and Perspectives. If I have not had the honor of meeting you yet, my name is Nancy Easterling. I am the executive director here at Historic Sotterley. And when I got a chance to see this film up in Annapolis, it was extraordinary. And I knew we needed to bring it down here. And I'm so grateful to our sponsor for this year's speaker series, Toyota Southern Maryland. Big round of applause for them, guys. They're amazing. Because what we're doing tonight is you all not only get a chance to see this, and Whiteford Systems in the back, Kayla and your crew, you guys are awesome. They're going to be live streaming this. So we've got over 100 people signed up online to watch with us. You guys didn't get food and drink. Sorry. You had to come here for that. But for those of you who are online, please do sign into the chat so that we know where you're joining us from. And you will have a chance to go ahead and put your questions in the chat. And I think there's a Q&A section. You'll be able to get your questions asked as well at the end. So just so you know how it's going to flow, we're going to be watching the film first tonight. And then we're going to have a tiny little intermission so we can bring some people up who are going to be on the presentation panel. And then we'll get going for the second part of the evening, very special interactive part. But this movie, when I saw it, was one of those movies that you said, this captures the fact that we pass on so much of our heritage through our family traditions. And what better tradition than those we have in our kitchen? How many times have you been, even if you weren't the person who cooked, even if the one you were banned from cooking, you still got to sit in there and listen and talk while it was going on. So much of what we have in common as people is that heritage that brings us together. So I want to bring up here to say a few words, if she will. Oh, she's back behind. There you are, Lucille. So when this was premiered up in Annapolis, this incredible presentation was made possible by the Southern Maryland National Heritage Area, by a Maryland Heritage Area Authority grant, and that presentation up there was from Preservation Maryland. And Lucille, I know you in the Heritage Area saw how incredible this could be, and you funded its production. I wanted to know if you come up and say a couple of words for us. Absolutely.
You all did not come here to hear us talk, so it will be brief. If you don't know about who and what we are, the Southern Maryland National Heritage Area is only one of 62 national heritage areas in the entire United States. And the only two in Maryland that are Maryland focused is the Southern Maryland National Heritage Area and the Baltimore National Heritage Area. These both are Maryland focused. There are many states that don't have a national heritage area. It's a very difficult thing to achieve. It requires a little bitty act of Congress, which isn't easy in the easiest of times. But in 2022 in December, we were passed by the U.S. Congress as a national heritage area, and President Biden signed us into law January of 2023. I'm telling you this because this region is profoundly special. This region informs our nation's history. That's the only way you become a national heritage area. And a lot of times when people think about that, they think of the big stories, right? The big impacts. But we're looking at it from every angle. Sometimes the most profound heritage is the quiet heritage. It's the quiet stories. It's the stories we pass on over a kitchen table. This initiative, I must say, and he's in the back and I won't bring him up right now, but was thoughtfully done by Craig Sewell in terms of, as a chef himself, trying to find ways to connect to people and tell those very quiet stories. He's a part of our steering committee, as are several people here, including Nancy, including Gwen, including Craig. So what we're doing right now with this film is just opening a door to not only Southern Maryland, but a little bit to the quiet humanity that we really need to see and feel right now. It's not a big impact story. It's not going to be one that you're going to see like car chases, and it's quiet. And we're really proud that we were able to be part of this and able to be a funder and also to premiere it. It will be on Maryland Public Television on November 23rd at 7:00. That will be a shorter version. They wanted 27 minutes. This is 57 minutes. So it will be highlighting 3 stories, but we're hoping people will call in with great enthusiasm so that they will want to have the second one with the other 3 stories. So thank you all for coming here tonight. If you have any questions for me, I'm available. Thank you.
So you're special because you get the whole thing. MPT, we love them, but they get the short version. We get the big version. So with no further ado, because we want to be able to get to the second part, we want to start this. Let us start the viewing of Grandma's Hands.
Ask someone about their grandmother, and chances are the story will quickly end up in a kitchen. And once there, the real story begins. Her strong hands dusted with flour, the food and aromas beckoning. Lives change, but the food will always be with us. Food is powerful. It nourishes our bodies. It excites our tastes. It is infused and marinated in emotion, and it provides us with a solid connection to our past. For generations, our grandma's hands have made memories, continued traditions, and blessed us with the knowledge of who we are. Throughout the peninsula that is Southern Maryland, people have cooked and gathered for centuries. The food and the recipes are messengers from whence we came. Food and recipes can define a family, a region, even a culture. They speak of a heritage learned from our grandma's hands. I'm Craig Sewell. I am fascinated about what goes on in kitchens, large ones like the locally sourcing restaurant I owned and cooked in for many years, or in small home kitchens where the hundreds of people I taught in cooking classes cook in every day. And these days, so do I. Our kitchens are our places. That is where we cook. I wanted to tell the deeply human and intimate stories that only Grandma's hands and recipes can tell. Along the way, I was privileged to meet 6 people who opened their kitchens, their recipes, their stories, and their hearts to me. They are as different as Southern Maryland has to offer, but all realize this very simple but vital tenet, that the kitchen is the heart of the home. There is power in those flour-dusted hands of our grandmothers. Their recipes speak to us of life and joy, love and struggle, and our past. And it all happens in the kitchen. Lawan Stribling wrote to me about her grandmother and food. She said, "I feel it's ancestral when I'm cooking and baking so much that I began a search for my heritage and ancestry because I'm so curious to know where my gifted hands came from." So that's where we begin, with Lawan and her Grandma Bailey's macaroni and cheese.
My grandma was born and raised in Northwest DC. Just hearing the stories of the struggle, of their lives, but yet things like this continues on. The food, just, it will always be here, right? And I am here in my home in Greenbelt, Maryland. I am a wife and a mom to 6. I'm definitely the magnet. And I love that I am there to be able to be that for them, because I really long for that growing up, to not having a mother. You know, I long to have that feeling. So I'm happy that I'm able to do that for them. My grandmother passed away on Juneteenth 2021. So sometimes it's hard to talk about her and not get teary-eyed. I can see myself on a red tricycle. I'm a little girl, and we're in the basement on our house on Key Street. She had like these wooden chairs in the kitchen, and I would sit there and just watch her. And I could just remember smelling the pepper smell.
How old were you the first time you did this?
I was 19 years old the first time I made macaroni and cheese.
Really?
Mm-hmm. I had to call my grandmother to prepare myself for having a child. I was pregnant, but I called my grandmother because I needed to learn how to make her macaroni and cheese. Like, I'm like, Grandma, I'm about to have this baby, and I want to be able to, you know, eat good with my kids and have them eat good and feel what I felt when I ate your food. So, Grandma, how we make this macaroni and cheese? So she taught me how to make actually a whole dinner. It wasn't just the macaroni and cheese. It was macaroni and cheese, barbecue ribs, and green beans. So that's how I learned that day. But what was special to me was the macaroni and cheese, because this is what I think of when I think about my grandmother, is how her macaroni and cheese smelled and tasted every time. No one's macaroni and cheese amounts to Grandma's macaroni and cheese. I don't care where we go. So I need to learn how to make her macaroni and cheese.
What's special about this room for you?
In this room, well,
To me, this is your home.
this is my home, and this is my sanctuary. This is my space, and this is where I spend the most of my time in the house, is in this kitchen. Because if I'm not cooking, I'm baking or I'm preparing something. I bake. I love baking. That was what really drew me to food, because I was curious about baking. And producing with my hands. Like, my passion for this, I needed to learn how to do it the right way. Like, I needed to learn all what goes into making the ingredients, feeling it, how it feels to make the pie crust. Like, you know.
While we were cooking, I was reminded of Chef Thomas Keller's statement that a recipe has no soul. You, as the cook, must bring soul to the recipe. And no one I've ever cooked with in a kitchen brings more of her soul to a recipe than Lamar.
Yeah, but it's all connected. I think if people take the time out to learn things, and it could just slow down their life a little bit, give them to learn some patience, and then also can work on your well-being, like your self-care, you know, because you can't always keep doing this and that for other people. Sometimes you just have to stop and take a pause out for yourself. And to me, I can do that in the kitchen. You see, we got our good pepper. But again, that was a journey that I had to get there to find this place, because I was very sad for many, many years. But food always made me happy. Food always made me happy. And I knew that I wanted to have this gift to share with other people, because I wanted it so much growing up and I didn't have it. So to be able to produce so much great food, and it makes people feel good. And I have people come to my house all the time who want to eat my food. And I love it, because I know that it's real and it's natural and it's a talent that was gifted to me naturally. I call it gifted hands, and I'm blessed by my ancestors to have these gifts, because again, I have no proper training, but I can do this very well. I mean, I feel it. I don't know how else to say it or explain it. I'm entirely blessed because I have this gift. Trust and believe that my grandmother is going through me, her grandmother went through her, and we are all linked. And it's going to continue on to my children. It's already happened with my son, because I told you I taught him how to cook. In 20 years, I used to think that those ages I would really be old at that time. But being 46 now, I understand that I'm still not going to be old at that time. My body may be a little bit old, but I'm just going to continue to blossom and grow. And my kids, I hope that they follow their passion and their dreams for whatever they see me doing, and be encouraged to follow their passions, because that's all I teach them to do. I can see myself being a grandparent, and my grandchildren are here and they're eating this food that I learned how to cook from my grandmother, you know? The plan is the homestead. So however that journey takes us and wherever my kids end up, I know it's going to be great, because we're going to be all together still, but maybe have our own properties on that land, but we'll still be together. And that's all that I can hope for. And I really, really feel that that's what our ancestors want us to do. I miss my grandma.
When Ms. Webb and I first met, we talked about the food she remembered cooking in her grandmother's farm kitchen. While we talked, it was clear we were talking about quite another time.
I'm very fortunate to have lived on this large farm here on the Sakai swamp. It fed me, gave me pleasure, and taught me many lessons.
The farmhouse that she grew up in with 21 in her family now sits hidden in a copse of maples at the end of the road. This is understandable, since Miss Webb is now 98 years old and was midwifed by her grandmother on the same property where she lives today. And this is where we cooked her recipe, on Miss Webb's historic Booth Farm. How much do you think we're going to use for crackling bread? This much? I arrived at Miss Webb's early in the morning with a 5-pound piece of freshly butchered pork belly fat by courtesy of the Amish butcher shop down the road. She had seen it all before. I laid the fat on the counter. Miss Webb grabbed a big meat cleaver, and off we went.
Oh. I'm gonna have to.
Can I help you?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to. Let's hope this will. I'm to think.
When Miss Webb and I first sat and talked, we spoke about crackling bread. No, not the fancy way now with buttermilk and seasoning. This crackling bread was born from using what was left from butchering the annual pig on Booth Farm.
Now I'm gonna turn the stove on.
So when you butchered a pig on the farm, you take that whole week to process that whole pig.
It took, because we had 8 of them.
8 of you working on that one pig?
No, 8 people.
To feed.
Uh-huh, yeah. Yeah. It looks like this don't want to brand. But I'm gonna turn it down a little bit, yeah, because it'll brown, yeah.
Well, while you cook that, why don't you let me cut up some of this for you? Because
Okay.
we brought you a lot today. And that's enough for one serving of crackling bread.
Yeah, 1 serving.
Okay.
Depending on how many you got.
And then your grandma Melly taught you how to do this.
Uh-huh.
Now, Ms. Webb, how old were you the first time you did this?
Oh, I guess in my teens, I guess. The pan is good and hot.
Okay. Are we going to use any of the meat? Or are we just going to use the fat?
No, we're just gonna use the fat.
Okay. On this farm, you use all of the gifts you were given. Everything from the pig was used. And this recipe was simple. Pork fat, cornmeal, water, and a cast iron skillet, and grit. A lot of grit. That's beautiful.
Mighty good.
So did you girls work the farm at all, or did you mostly stay inside?
No, we stayed at home. We stayed in the kitchen. We stayed in the garden. We stayed picking blackberries, strawberries.
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
Well, I have a feeling when you were growing up that your family meals were made out of food that you produced.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Definitely.
Wasn't bought at the grocery store.
No. Only the salt.
No waste,
No waste.
no want.
No want. That's right.
Your grandmother taught you the golden rule.
Uh-huh.
But in your book, you also say she taught you about plenty of food to eat, plenty of room to roam,
Uh-huh.
and love galore.
That's right.
Kind of sounds like you.
That's me. Yeah, that's me. Sometimes we would go to church and grown up, not a grown up, I would say a teenager at their house, and they would see my grandmother. They would come running over and say to my grandmother, I don't want to go back over there. So my grandmother would bring them home with her. I just put a little in to sample it, and then when I'm just about through, I'll just pour the rest of it and make one large one. Oh.
One of the reasons for using crackling bread is to use every part of the food that you're blessed with.
Uh-huh. Food, yeah. Use every part of the hug, yeah.
Use the leftovers.
Uh-huh. Use the leftovers.
Now, when you make crackling bread, do you make it just for special occasions, or do you make it?
No. I make it whenever I feel like eating it. Make it anytime.
Does it bring back memories of when you learned to make it back in the day?
Oh, yes. Yeah, brought back memories.
Mm.
Oh, this other one ain't quite ready. Cool. When it cools, you may have it.
When your grandmother told you to learn to paddle your own canoe, what she mean by that?
Do for yourself. Don't be asking people to do things for you. Get on out there and paddle it and go all across the water. You know, you tell me your story, and I'm listening. And so I'm listening, I'm learning from you about your grandma and what she cooked.
She was very important to me.
There's that. You just put that in the sink.
Yep.
Let me see. It's a top over there, too.
My grandmother had a saying that you never learn anything with your mouth open.
Now, why did she say that? Mouth open.
Because with your mouth open,
When you're talking, your mouth
talking.
open. Okay.
You're never learning anything when you're doing that.
Just talking.
Yeah.
That's good. Step on there. Yeah. And say, that's it.
You are publishing your second book
Yeah.
now, and it's a book of poetry. And you read a poem to me earlier today, and I'd like for you to read it now. Can you do that? It's right there.
Wait a minute. It says, my early thoughts. Come to the farm where your ancestors lived and where your roots began. Don't be alarmed. It's not the end. We will tell you how it all began. Stand on the land where your ancestors stood. Listen to the stories that have never been told. Hear it from the young and hear it from the old. Meet your neighbors and the new neighbors too. Folks, there is unity here. It has always been and always will be. Land, God's gift to man. Trees stand so straight and tall. Imagine the Sakaya swamp where ancestors fished and hunt so that we could be survived and keep us alive. Good enough.
Beautiful. Cooking food grown close to you was not only true on Miss Webb's Booth Farm, but it's also currently true on the Griffith family farm. With Miss Webb's Land, God's Gift to Man lingering in my mind, I visited the gift that is the Griffith family farm, meeting with Mom Chris, daughter Kayla, and granddaughter Estelle on this third-generation farm.
There's something special in the soil that we take care of it, and it takes care of us and produces some just delicious food. So we call this farm Griffith Family Farm. We've been here for 100 years this year.
And I live here, and my 2 children live on the farm here with us in their houses. It's very nice to have them nearby. Everybody can just drop in. You know, it's nice to have everybody run in here, have a meal, head back out the door. In 5 minutes, they're home. Now with 4 grandchildren and everyone else, you know, the table's starting to shrink. So, but it's fun. It's noisy. It's crazy. You know, we have 2 high chairs and booster seats and accommodate everybody.
There is a humbleness, a strength, and a quiet joy that emanates from people who farm and touch the soil each day.
Basically, my dad is teaching me everything that I need to know about farming. I grew up on the farm, and I grew up working on the farm, and but we used to be a tobacco farm. So I'm almost starting from square one by learning, and my dad is very, very patient with me, and he's a very good teacher.
I talked about breakfast on the farm with Kayla, her as a youngster waking from spending the night with Grandma Lillian and making sweet potato pancakes from sweet potatoes raised as a marketable crop right here.
I think many people associate their grandmothers with cooking and baking and all those sort of things, and I do have those associations with my grandmother. Both of my grandmothers. But I had approached this from like Southern Maryland, sort of like Lillian's cooking and sitting down to family meals at her house. And then I thought, well, the sweet potato pancakes are perfect because, you know, when I was little, we had pancakes every morning with Grandma. When we were little, she would make, what do we call them? Dollar pancakes.
Oh, yeah. Silver dollar pancakes.
Silver dollar pancakes. And she would put chocolate chips and whipped cream and sprinkles. I mean, she went the whole 9 yards for giving us like treats when we were over there. Oh, that was always the funniest because she could not sit down for more than a minute or two, and she would get up, make sure everybody had something on their plate. Most of us, she would say, "Oh, you don't have enough," but Earl, you're eating too much. And that was my grandfather. She probably would have worked at soil conservation or in her flower beds, you know, all the time if you didn't have to do those things like eat and sleep. And so for her to be at home cooking, she really cared for us that she did that because it took so much of her time. You know, but food was so, I mean, it's more than just nutrition. It was love for her.
Well, see, now you have a responsibility to teach this one how to do math.
So we are going to work on that. And I actually think we'll be learning from our grandma too. Yeah. I'm starting from square one almost to learning how to cook, and my mom is teaching me, and she's patient, but also I have to do things her way when I'm learning.
No, she's not big on the extensive cookings like I enjoy.
As Kayla and I were talking, Mom Chris from across the kitchen chimed in and started talking about the donuts her mother and grandmother would make once a year for Fosnacht the night before Lent. The more she talked, the more animated she became. Kayla and I exchanged glances. Could we convince Chris to get up at 2 a.m. to prep the dough? Sunday pancakes on the farm with freshly made donuts? The morning came for us to make sweet potato pancakes with baby Estelle outfitted in her sweet potato onesie, and I found Chris had gotten up early for us and was finishing her second dough rising. We were doing donuts too. Time for kitchen joy.
The salt, we got 1 teaspoon of salt, and then we need 1 egg. So
I always double check it. I love to cook, always have. I think I picked that up from my mom. She started helping me with cooking when I was young, which she did with all of us. Some liked it better than others. But you got to scrape everything out of the bowl.
Everything?
Everything
Even all
out,
of that?
everything out of the bowl. That was one thing. My mom always made sure you get everything out of the bowl that's in there.
Was she a waste not, want not kind of person?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Well, she was born in 1920 and grew up during the Depression.
There you go.
So that kind of
There you go.
answers that question. And she was the third born of 14 children.
Holy smokes.
So
Am I good yet?
that's good. That's good. My mom was always in the kitchen. The kitchen was like the gathering place of our house. Mom stayed home, take care of all 7 of us. She did not go to work. My dad worked at the railroad for 40 years, so he was the breadwinner, so to speak. Mom did all the cooking and the taking care of children and everything else. So we enjoyed her cooking. I mean, she was a fabulous cook. She learned from her mom. We'd have a meal, but the meal wasn't just sit down, eat, and go. It was you'd sit there afterwards and you'd talk. And, you know, you may not clean the dishes up right away, but you would sit there and you would talk. And if you weren't having a meal, you would just sit at the kitchen table and have conversation. And we just, to this day, a lot of us make a lot of her recipes.
So we're making a kind of donut that your mom used to make for you. And what's the name of that donut again?
They're called Fosnots. And it was tradition in the Hagerstown area, which it still is today.
It was tradition in these and other Germanic communities to empty their larders of sweets and sugars in observation of the fast before Easter, hence the donuts. And as any child will attest, there is no more joy in a kitchen than making fresh donuts.
That's what my mom did. I watched her all my life make donuts. And I just one day after I'd gotten married, I said, Mom, I want to make some donuts. So she gave me the recipe and I just started making them. I think of her anytime I make any of her meals. You know, anything and everything she's given me recipes for or taught me or. When I was little, this is what we would help our mom with. She would set the cutter on the dough like this and then tell us to push. So that's what I did with my granddaughter the other day when she was here. I'd say, okay, Evie, push. And then she really enjoyed pulling the little hole out. I love to make things and give to people. Myself and my one sister, I think are the ones in the family that like cooking the most, you know, but they all have picked up certain talents of my mom from the cooking aspect. And of course, the eating aspect, we all do real good at.
Early in this journey, I was gifted 2 cookbooks, The Treasured Recipes of Old St. Mary's 1634 to 1958, and 300 Years of Black Cooking in St. Mary's County, Maryland. It is clear from reading these books of recipes from Southern Maryland home kitchens that many different foodways were nurtured from this same soil, with one learning from the other. And I began a search for a place, a recipe, and a touch of Grandma's hand, where all the foodways could and did meet. and I found that place in Serenity Farm with Franklin Robinson.
I'm Franklin A. Robinson Jr. We're here at Serenity Farm, which is the family farm. In the working life, I teach at George Mason University. I teach playwriting as well as script analysis. And then I'm also an archivist for the Archive Center, National Museum of American History, Smithsonian Institution, and amongst other volunteer duties that I do throughout the week.
And for me, you are my resident historian.
Oh, thank you.
From the bluff, a broad plain expands down to the Patuxent River. With its fertile farmland and access to abundant game, fish, and oysters, this has been a gathering and cooking place for literally centuries. Fire circles have been found here with artifacts dating back 13,000 years.
We sit today on lands that once the Piscataway Conoy were all over. My family's been lucky enough to have been given this land for however long we're able to hold on to it or work it or farm it. You know, it's just but a mere second in the huge timeline of the history of this place. Every day you walk out of the door, it's just thinking about that. Yeah.
Cooking our food is what made us human. It vastly improved our diets, and it encouraged us to gather together, to share. And it's my belief that these early people were very much like us. They grew or gathered their food, they cooked, they ate as families and groups as today.
When we do have school tours and things come here, I always tell the kids, I said, the ground that you are walking on, people have walked on this for thousands of years. We're just a blip.
Yes, Serenity was and is a place of gathering. For 350 generations, cooking has gone on here with the first people, white settlers, enslaved people, the British Army in the War of 1812. Everyone cooked here. I also think that at every gathering, there was a best cook and a best recipe that everyone wanted to know.
I learned to cook from, well, a little bit from my mother, but not much. She died very early. But from my grandmothers, who learned to cook from their mothers, who learned to cook from their mothers. So how many thousands years of cooking history reside in me right now? So yeah, all of that, you know, you just, like I said, it's been passed down and passed down and passed down. And so you have this literally thousands of years of cooking history that reside in each one of us.
And when it came time to select a recipe that could speak of these things, Franklin and I kept coming back to the harvest wagon in the field at the end of the tobacco harvest. You want me to cook stuff?
I do. I want you to do something. So this came from my grandmother, Elizabeth Bourne Robinson, and she was born and raised on a farm in Calvert County near Cheneyville. At the end of the tobacco season, we would all get together with whoever had helped us that year and everyone would bring their best dish or something to eat, a big potluck, right? So this is always something just easy to bring as a condiment. So we all used it, and black, white in between, and was something that, like I said, you can use on chicken, you can use on ribs, whatever. So it was a point of coming together for all of us. And that can go right in there. Yep. Perfect. You're much faster than I am.
So I'm guessing she would make this once a year?
Yes.
Made that much?
Yep. When tomatoes would come in.
So this was end of the season. This was harvest time.
Right. Yeah, right. Which coincided exactly with tobacco, right?
Mm-hmm. And so this was end of the harvest. Can you kind of paint that picture for me?
Sure. So the flat that you see down there literally would have been stripped of all of the tobacco plants. So you have just everything is denuded, but you could still, of course, see the stalks where they had, been cut off. The tobacco would go up. You'd push it up in the barn, get that all hung. And finally, then your reward was a lovely meal. Just a nice sense of community, of coming together and having, you're going to get me crying now. There was a sense of community, that...
a task completed.
Yes. Work well done.
Work well done.
And that everybody had a hand in it.
Growing tobacco was a Southern Maryland mainstay. It is hard physical work, and it required working together on Serenity to get the tobacco harvested and hung to dry. Then they would pull the wagon back out into the field, and everyone brought food to share. And the star of the show was always Franklin grandmother's chili sauce.
This will render for about 2 to 3 hours. But the smell with those spices is just amazing. And she cooked a lot on her home comfort wood range. So anytime I smell wood smoke, all of those memories just flood back.
Wood smoke and chili sauce.
Okay, now I'm going to put you to work again. These 3 need to go in a sachet. And so this is cinnamon and the stick cinnamon, and I usually put 3 of these, and they just go right in there. Of course, those will come out at the end. All right. I'll add a little bit more celery seed just to make it go for
It is remarkable, and I am struck by the commonality that sitting here at Serenity Farm and knowing what limited amount that we actually know about what happened here makes us stop, I think, and realize that around food that there's a commonality to humanity.
Right.
The history of enslaved people having worked the land of Serenity with tobacco, wheat, livestock, and other crops was revealed when an unmarked cemetery of 22 enslaved people of both genders and all ages was discovered in 2012. Tenderly investigated by archaeologists, we learned of these people, how they lived and what they ate. All will be buried with respect, and it is central to any visit here to give full measure to the ones who have lived, worked, eaten, and passed on at this place.
And that burial ground there are men, women, and children buried there, and infants. So in one of the infants' graves, they found a fish scale. Now, we all know that a fish scale, probably about yay big, right? But they were able to tell that fish was a perch, a white perch, caught here in the Patuxent. So then you start thinking, so was that the child's last meal? Was that the mother had just been cleaning some fish and had to go bury her child? That one little thing just gets you going. And to what was that fish? What was that fish to them? And the fact that it ended up and was still intact enough to be studied 200 years later just blows my mind.
Absolutely. And it was food.
And it was food.
Franklin, thanks for doing what you do.
Oh, well, my pleasure.
This has been a great day.
I'm Tiandra Thompson. I reside here in Lexington Park area, and welcome my kitchen. That right there.
Tiandra occupies a very special place in my heart. She teaches people how to cook, and even more, she teaches kids how to cook. Tiandra first attracted my attention when she described her Nanny Teresa Young's bread pudding as a masterpiece dessert using a few ingredients and her hands. Things just got better visiting Tiandra for the first time. There were big handwritten recipes taped to the wall for chocolate chip cookies and other desserts. Those were for the local children who came to her home for cooking classes. And then to top it off, she asked me if I had seen the book. The book turned out to be The 300 Years of Black Cooking in St. Mary's County, saying on the cover, "Come in, sit down, make yourself at home." You gave me one of my favorite books now, which is this one here. Now, is that bread pudding that we did today in here?
It is.
Can you find that for me?
Oh, yeah. Put another spot. And the beauty of this book is that it was men, women of all ethnicities, backgrounds, and they decided to come together and put it in here. Yeah. I'll get to it soon. There we go. That's it. Right there.
The book is a cornucopia of delights and a glimpse into the day-to-day lives of African Americans in this part of the South. So it was with delight that I found the recipe that I would be doing with Tiandra in the cookbook. So bread pudding from Teresa Young in Leonardtown.
Yes.
So let's talk about her for a little while.
Sure.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. I like talking about her. 1.5 cups of raisins, which I'm sure she didn't use measuring cups and spoons, and she did it by sight. Not that daring yet. I just remember her. I was, young girl, but just always in that kitchen. Now between meals, prepping and cooking, she would play solitaire, but I just always remember her being at the table, being at the stove. Like I said, putting ingredients together, creating these dishes that just were so good to our soul. Some of my fondest memories, of course, would be Christmas, the holidays, where it would be, the cookies, chocolate chip, black walnut with chocolate chip cookies, Russian tea cakes, and family, all of her children, her grandchildren. And we would just all huddle into the living room, half the size of this kitchen, in a trailer. And it was nothing but smiles, love. We would just sit around the table or wherever you could find a seat, and you dove in. Still hot.
But when you talk about her, you mostly talk about her baking. And now baking is what you do.
Yes.
So you're following in her footsteps. She's taught you a lot. Now you're going to take your hands and you're just going to stick your hands in there and you're going to mix that all.
No, I'm not one of these new age bakers. I use the fork and do it. Now she might have put her hands in it to do it. I'm sure, but no.
I think it's roll up your sleeves. Do you know this woman? Edna Lewis? Edna Lewis was the first celebrated New York City African-American female chef.
Wow.
Yeah. She's an amazing woman. There are so few people that actually teach this love of cooking. And I see that in you.
Well, first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut up the bread, tear up the bread. So
we're just going to tear it up. We're going to leave it in.
Yep. I'm leaving gloves on, of course, because that's just me, the baker in me. And it doesn't have to be fancy and cute.
Are we doing like 1 inch square?
Let me show this man how to do this. This is all I do. See what I'm doing? I'm just tearing it up because that's what she did. Yeah. I'm spiritual, so Holy Spirit told me to combine what I love, which is passion, is is children. I grew up watching my mom take care of children too, right? So it was that, combining that with baking, what I do now. And so on her birthday, my mom's birthday, I was like, I'm not going to be sad. I'm going to celebrate her birthday. So I hosted my first baking class with the children that I previously had taken care of years ago, before that. And it was phenomenal. And I've taught over 10, 15 classes. So I'm going to stir this up. And then if you like to crack the eggs for me, please.
And right in here.
Actually, you're going to crack it in that bowl there, just in case it's a bad egg, shells, and all the good things. The children they've come into my home, some that I know, some that I have never met. I've done camps, baking camps, where we take weeks long time frame. We've made homemade bread, homemade butter, cakes, cookies, brownies. I do a baking therapy class for children, teaching them coping skills like baking therapy to cope through the loss of a parent or just it's a time where they can come into a place where they feel safe. It smells so good. But like I said, then it was like I just grew a love of it and was so filled by it. So I'm like, well, let's do camps. Let's do this every day. Like, honestly, we're 5 years, even if it's not that brick and mortar at that time, but to be able to teach classes every day.
So now we're going to do the sauce for the bread pudding. So we've boiled some water. We've added some butter.
Sugar.
And now we're adding some sugar. Now, all of this is also in the 300 years of St. Mary's kind of cooking too, right?
Yes, the exact.
Thinking about her, I was reminded of a quote from the great Julia Child. People who love to eat are always the best people. And Tiandra is best people. She brings a joy and a message to her cooking, which will hopefully inspire young ones to also make their kitchens their place in their home. Nanny Teresa Young would be proud.
She just exemplified love, and it was just always around her. No matter what, there was no judgment. She made you feel welcomed. If anyone, I was always told if anyone needed something to eat, they knew they could stop by her house to grab a plate. She always made sure that you left, you weren't hungry. And she just loved her family. She really did. And anyone that came her way, they say the same thing. I couldn't have been born into a better.
I think she'd be proud of you.
I think so too. I'd like to think so too. And that's the thing, like she just inherited that baking through her mother, who owned a hotel, who she said she baked all the time, and desserts. She would rather have a dessert before she would have the main course. So,
a woman after my...
Right. There's nothing wrong with bread pudding for breakfast and, with a cup of coffee. It sits well.
Same. Anthony Bourdain famously said, "Food is everything we are. It is an extension of your ethnic feeling, your personal history, your tribe, your grandma. Food is inseparable from those." That is the way food is used at Tiffany Barber's Gracehaven Farm. In my visits to Gracehaven, I have appreciated the peace and the kitchen that Tiffany has created. It's finally good to be able to cook in this magnificent space with her and be included in the big family she feeds in so many ways. 5 years ago, I met you and walked through that door.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what did I tell you?
You said we're going to cook together in this kitchen.
We're going to cook together in this kitchen. And it took us 5 years. But we're going to cook together in this kitchen. And we're going to do your grandmother's recipe. This is the greatest written recipe I've ever seen.
Yeah, the cablegram.
The cablegram recipe.
Probably the only piece of paper she could find, I guess, in the moment. And she typed out her recipe for the family.
So we're making her tomato sauce. We have pork and beef and lamb that we're all doing in this.
All in one dish.
All in this dish. Mm-hmm. So we're making spaghetti and meatballs.
Absolutely. With sausage.
With sausage.
Yeah.
Cutting onions. I excel at cutting onions.
Perfect.
So I shall do that. Do you want to?
I'll strip the sausage.
You want to unleash the sausage?
Absolutely.
Now, how do you remember this dish?
Well, I can remember being in my grandmother's kitchen, and she would have a big pot on the stove, and you'd walk in, and the first thing you'd smell it. And so what she would do is she would take out a piece of Wonder Bread, put it on a little tiny plate, slather it with sauce, and then layer it on top of that with some Parmesan cheese.
You've thought about a few different recipes that you wanted to do.
Yeah.
And you settled on this one. Why?
Well, my life, I feel like, parallels my grandmother's. Smell it. And so what she would do is she would take out a piece of Wonder Bread, put it on a little tiny plate, slather it with sauce, and then layer it on top of that with some Parmesan cheese.
You've thought about a few different recipes that you wanted to do.
Yeah.
And you settled on this one. Why?
Well,
My life, I feel like, parallels my grandmother's in some ways. My grandmother she had 6 children. I birthed 6 children. We adopted 2 more. My grandmother's recipes really just were the center of my childhood. And it's something that I carry forward with my kids.
And I'm not crying because of the story that you just told me.
My onions are that good?
Your onions are that good. And you use cast iron.
I do. This actually was from my other grandmother. This is my grandma Ruby's.
That's exactly where I was going.
Yeah, this was her cast iron pan that she, raised her kids on.
And when you pick that out of your cupboard every time, you think of her, don't you?
I do.
So, Tiffany, as we saute off the sausage now and the onions, and we're going to do a little bit of garlic. Well, let's talk about your farm.
Grace Haven Farm.
Grace Haven Farm.
Well, we have our sign out front that says, we plant hope, we grow faith, and we harvest love. And I think that's really symbolic of what we try to create. This is not a home for just us to build this great big house for us to enjoy. It's a place where people come and cook and eat.
Now, what role does the kitchen play in all of that?
When I brought my daughter home from China, the first night home, we couldn't sleep because of the 12-hour distance. And I put her in a chair because she was so little, and I threw her at the island with me, and we made muffins because cooking together is connecting. So I had this grand idea that we were going to make muffins together, and she was going to love the muffins. But she took a bite of the muffin, she was like, no. But the memory is still sweet. My intention was to try to build connection with her. But what I experienced was learning about her. I realized that I was going to need to consider what mattered to her, not just what mattered to me.
So did you come up with things that she liked to do after that?
It took a long time. It did. But yeah, we did. We eventually found how to feed her in a way that made her feel safe and things were familiar to her. But it was a while. That looks good. Let's make some meatballs. All right, I'm going to pop some eggs in while you're doing that.
And we're using your ingredients here. We're using lamb from your farm.
Yeah.
We're using beef from a friend's farm, Earl Lumpkin.
Yeah, Park Green Hill Farm.
Park Green Hill Farm, which is on the other side of the river from here.
And I'm going to add.
Okay, and to that, we're going to need to do our breadcrumbs.
Okay, ready?
Go for it.
And then we're going to add the basil. And then I'm going to do a little bit of salt. And I like to add some Parmesan cheese. There you go. That looks good. Let's just see if it's going to. Yeah, that's fine. Yep, we're going to make those into little meatballs. When they're dry and they're really hard, they don't tend to be as tender. These would be great.
In good kitchens, everyone is welcome. Everyone is equal. There are no titles. There is no yelling or screaming or anything but lighthearted competition. Everyone works together towards the common goal, making a meal together. And we celebrate at the end by collectively eating the same foods, our bodies responding in the same ways, making donuts, making macaroni and cheese, or making Tiffany Barber's great-grandmother Rose's tomato and meatball sauce. It nourishes our body and our souls.
And then it's just going to steam it. It's going to start to have some steam come off the top, but not a boil. And as that happens, it's going to thicken. And
you want it
all
to
of the
reduce.
meats are going to flavor that sauce, and it's going to be so good. Plus, the meatballs will continue to be more tender than the sausage as it cooks really slow.
And at the end, the meatballs and the sauce can only be truly appreciated when folded into a slice of soft white bread. I just kind of had the feeling when you were a kid, you just sort of folded it over and ate it, didn't you?
I think you're right. I think you're exactly right. I just folded it over. It's hard to remember. Oh, it's good.
I think it's everything mixed together here.
That's really good. I think I need another meatball.
As much as I love the people highlighted in this short film, I have a feeling that if we were going to go down virtually any street in America, I think we would have the same rich opportunity to find equally compelling stories. It's those flowered hands that I remember about my grandmother's kitchen. Those hands were the hands of a strong woman and reflected a lifetime of hard work. She learned to cook on wood stoves. She was the daughter of a traveling pastor. She would hum and tell me stories of her childhood, her parents, and her grandparents. She connected me to my family's humble past. Her name was Laddie. She had sisters named Maddie, Hattie, Bonzi, and May, and brothers named John, Elmer, Homer, and the twins, Cordell and Ordell. She was a country woman. Sunday morning breakfast with her was fried chicken, chocolate gravy, and buttermilk biscuits. I tried to replicate her biscuits for years. I tried using leaf lard or Crisco, raw, or buttermilk. I made very good biscuits, but it was always missing something. One evening, as I was scanning some old home movies that my daughters and wife had digitized, when I was startled to see my grandmother making buttermilk biscuits, with my mother and my aunt, along with my little sister and a skinny little blonde kid acting goofy in the background. Laddie was stirring the biscuit batter in the saucepan while the others patted the mixed dough into rounds for the oven. And now I make perfect biscuits because I found out what I had missed. I had missed my grandma's hands. Remarkable stories from grandma's hands are born in every kitchen across the planet every day. And these hands speak to me of one truth, that inside each of us is a quiet place where our thoughts and our memories mingle with aromas and taste and define for us a place of belonging, a place of comfort, a place of love, the place where we came from. Lives change, but the food will always be with us. Okay, now, everybody in the kitchen.
So we are going to get set up so we can bring some of these amazing people that you got to go into their kitchens. Now we're going to bring people up here together. So let us get some chairs up here. Give us just 1 second.
And it's 2 years this week since I lost my own grandmother.
Oh. We might have enough here. We might have enough. Thank you. Okay, everybody. So we're going to bring up some of the participants, but let me first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to let the amazing Mr. Craig Sewell, who was the producer, director. Let me just give you a little bit of background on Mr. Sewell, because you just think, okay, he's pretty good with his hands in the kitchen, and he takes directions well. Didn't like you got in trouble too much in the kitchen. But he is the Economic Development and Program Director for the Southern Maryland Agricultural Development Commission. The Southern Maryland Meats Program is under his watch, as is the building of the infrastructure to create the seamless farm to kitchen supply chain for the region. A successful business owner, professional chef, and restaurateur, Craig brought a wealth of experience and entrepreneurism to SMATIC. His cafe in Annapolis was for 16 years on the forefront of the buy local movement and was one of the first restaurants in the area to source locally and develop a conduit for his customers to buy local produce and meats through the restaurant's CSA program. Former Governor Martin O'Malley recognized Sewell's contribution to Maryland farms by awarding him the Smart Green and Growing Governor's Excellence in Supporting Maryland's Farm and Agriculture Award. A graduate of Harvard University with AB in economics, he was also a founding president of the Annapolis Sustainable Business Alliance and Master Gardener. And obviously, he's very handy in the kitchen and was the mastermind behind this. So, Craig, I would like you to come up and sit up here and share some moments with all of us, and we'll get to answer some questions after we do a little bit of talking. I would love for you to introduce some of the incredible cast. We feel like we know you already. We loved every moment with you, and we can't wait to have a few more. So go right ahead.
Thank you. Hi, how are you? Did you like it? You know what we didn't have? We didn't have enough kids. We needed more kids. Do you make anything in the kitchen? What? What? Bread? Good for you. I'm not sure if I actually need this.
If you can, just so they can hear you online.
That's
why you'll need the mic.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming. You know what this is? Is that you're never too old to do new things. And I'd gotten to know Lucille several years ago, and she had grants that she gives out. And I for a couple of years, I was wondering about how I could incorporate heritage with what I know, which is food. And this idea came to me, and I pitched it to Lucille, and she immediately jumped on board with it. And the real magic in this is not with me, but with the film crew. We went into each one of these kitchens and spent hours with each other, hours. And then it comes out to 8 minutes. Truly, it comes out to 8 minutes. And the film crew somehow burrowed into my brain and decided what it was, and then made it happen on the screen. So I'm really pleased you're here. This was a passion project for me. The older I get, the more I realize that there are only a few things that I know well. And from teaching cooking classes and teaching people how to cook for years, because literally I taught hundreds of cooking classes. Kitchens are magic places, whether they're commercial kitchens or whether they're home kitchens, because that's just about where everything happens. It's where smiles happen and tears happen and stories happen, and it's the aromas happen. Unfortunately, things like food TV sort of corrupt it, and turn it into some sort of competitive place. When I did cooking classes in Annapolis, frequently I would have corporations come and want to do team building cooking classes where on, this table is doing a great job, right? But this table over here, not so much. That's not a kitchen, okay? That's selling real estate, okay? That's kitchen. Kitchens are places where people come together. They're great levelers. In cooking classes that I taught, nobody cared what you did all day. You just came together, you cooperated, you made food. And maybe especially like this week, which was, this week is just the gift that keeps on giving. But we have to find ways to be able to communicate with each other. And I know how to do it. I do it with food. Because inside Lawan and inside Franklin and inside Tiffany, and where are you, Tiandra? There is that special place. And it's in each one of you too. And maybe grandma unlocks it and maybe it's somebody else, but somebody does. And we all are able to talk with each other from that common place. So we're going to do more films. Okay. Woo! And if it's with me, it's going to start with food because that's where it all begins. So, Lawan, come on up here. Tiandra, Tiffany, and Franklin. And if y'all want to talk about or ask any questions of us, here we are. These are my people.
So guys, one thing we'll do with the questions, if you don't mind, if you'll raise your hand, I'll come around, I'll bring the mic just so the people online can have a clue what you just asked. So who was asking the first question? Did somebody have it back?
Hello, everybody. It's really not about food, but since you said it was cut down to 8 minutes, is there going to be one with all the bloopers?
There are some excellent bloopers. Excellent bloopers. Some of them actually made it into the film, to tell you the truth. You're asking me to recount some of them. I don't know. Let me think about it. I'll come back to it.
Well, maybe we should be asking them rather than asking you.
You know, that's actually a good point.
There's that point. Hang on just one sec.
So I think we all love the feel, the home, it just felt like we were there in the kitchen with everyone. You had a camera crew there. How long did it take people to relax? And how did you get everybody? Y'all did such a wonderful job. You're amateurs and you all looked so wonderful doing it. How did you make that happen?
It's a good film. How this actually occurred is that through SMATIC, I put out a press release. And these folks responded. Actually, I pursued you. But these folks responded with highlights, with a recipe. And as you can tell, I wasn't after a recipe. I was after a story. And of the respondents, then I selected some that we went and I sat down with them at their home. And I wanted to see if we communicated. At what level did we feel comfortable with each other? And with each one of these folks, we established very early on a bond. And then when we went, and so we had that meeting, and then we had a second meeting with the film crew, which they went all over the house, covering up windows, taking light readings, mapping the whole thing out, where I should stand, where, which I never did pay attention to. But, and so by the time that we came around to do the filming, we kind of knew each other. And then we spent really honestly the entire day with each other. So while the film crew did their thing, we talked. We talked the whole time. And I think it shows. I think it communicates.
So, of course, online, if there's anybody who'd like to do anything online, you may certainly ask. Catherine will be able to pick it up. But I'd like to hear from each one of you why you wanted to be part of this movie. Why did you volunteer or agree to do it, whether you volunteered or not? Why did you want to be part of this? And you can take your turns. Everybody's got a mic. That's because you're formulating your answer. We know that.
Well, for me, I was eager to share my grandmother's story, just because we come from so much brokenness, right, in my family, and it was important for me to share what I remember in my childhood. And it's true, food brings me joy. So my first memory is food with my grandmother, because we all lived in the same house on Q Street. So I wanted to share her story and just let people know that, we have this serious issue in our community, and we have to get back to what it is to be a community, and that's to be together and to cook and talk and have these conversations around food and the table. And I really aspire for my family to have that for me, because I was home to 17. I realized I'm repeating the same story that my grandmother had, being a single mother, a teen mom, and having to go through this journey. So I was eager. And it was a book. It was just supposed to be a book at the beginning. So all this came about later.
Ooh, you got pulled in backwards.
I'm going to interject something, and then it's your turn. Okay. The first one I did was Ms. Webb, and who just turned 100, just by the way. And the time with Miss Webb was just magical. I mean, it was just a lot of fun. And then I went and spent the day with Luan. And as the film crew and I started calling her the amazing Luan, and I drove back from her house, and I cried the whole way, because I knew that I had a hold of something, and it was important. And then everybody else happened. And by the end of it, it was, and I asked Lucille to come over to the house. A lot takes place around the island in my kitchen, just by the way. So I asked her, and I showed her rough cuts. And she looked at all of them, and she loved all of them, but she just said, when she watches a documentary, the first thing that she asks is why. I thought, wow, why? Why am I doing this? So it was, the challenge for me was taking all of these stories and tying them all together and making the story. So anyway, that's the impact you had on me. Your turn.
I would say the same, just sharing the story, the love that was always felt, and just wanting to share that with everybody else. And at first I wasn't too sure about it because she had passed on. So I reached out to Craig, and he was like, yep, let me hear it, so, and then the rest is history. So, yeah.
Well, for me, I grew up an only child, and ended up building this amazing family of 8 kids and 5 grandkids. And what has been significant about raising a family is when you have 8 kids in the house, you're busy all day long. It's chaotic a lot, and it's a lot of hard work. But at the end of every day, we would gather as a family around the table. You saw the picture of the 2 tables together. which my dining room right now just is 2 tables always. And so for me to say yes to this is really about exposing the world to the value of that table, and how our family, being an only child, and then I lost my dad when I was young. So being raised as almost like raising yourself, and then having the opportunity to build a family, dinner time became that place where you learn to express yourself. You learn to, what matters to you. That's where you have those discussions. It's where connection really happens, because the rest of the day you're busy doing things that have to get done. But around the table, you get to enjoy each other. You get to enjoy foods. And of course, prepping the dinner, you're gathering together, and you're being a team. And so for me, obviously we build a connection. And so I said yes because of our connection, but I also said yes because dinner matters, meals matter, foods matter. And I think you're so right. It's not really about the recipes. I think your family learns to love what you make, whether it's, out of a box or whether it's from scratch. It's the connection that you build around that meal that brings the people together. And so for me, I just wanted to share how important our table is. And if you don't gather for dinner, I hope that you do, because I think that it's an important place. And I think you have to make time for that. And we live in a time where people are on their phones, or where they're eating standing up, or they're walking around, or they're not sitting together. And it's an intimate, special time, and it's a privilege. And so I just wanted to share that.
Guess it's my turn, right? Okay. So I would say ditto to everything that's been said before. But for me, I think I don't know if it's Egyptian or not, but it says to speak the name of the dead is to make them live again. And for me, these recipes are a way of keeping all of these people I've known alive. Every time I open the cookbook, I remember my grandmother at her wood stove, my other grandmother who lived on another farm, and each one had the recipes. So Craig was inundated. He had like 4 recipes for me to choose from. So, but yeah, it's remembering them and honoring them. That's the short answer.
Are there any other questions anybody has in here? The what's for dinner? Yes. Anybody have a question? Yes.
A little bit off the side, but does the name Millie Fletcher mean anything to you? Okay, if I'm not mistaken, in that second cookbook, I believe it's the cookbook of Southern Maryland, where she has 1 or 2 recipes or something like that. But our story is we 40 years ago we bought a property next to Millie, and it's documented that for 75 years she was in the kitchen at Trinity Church, St. Mary's Parish, for their annual fall oyster and ham dinner. There's a picture of her when she was 4, and of course many of us remember when she was there when she was 75. But the connection she had with her granddaughter, we don't know anything about whether it was food or not. But when you talk to her granddaughter, who at that point was 10 or 12, the greatest thing is that her parents would send her down, and she didn't put on a pair of shoes for the whole time she was with Grandma Millie. But it was really a wonderful thing to know her. And when we would come down for weekends, there'd be a basket of tomatoes and cucumbers at our back step and stuff like that. So it's just another story that you're talking about of people who are just, around food. It was so important to them.
And you just started a story. You just started it, because there's a long way for that story to go. And see what happened with these folks, and what happens with me in a kitchen is that, people talk. I knew I had a successful cooking class, for instance, because I'd bring in 16, 20
times have I said, I wish I had sat down with how many of my relatives and just asked them the questions that I had in my mind. I thought, oh, well, I get it another time. So that's my suggestion is don't wait, do it now. A good oral history, and all that means is sitting, well, tape recorder. Who has a tape recorder now, right? I guess your phone, right? Yeah. And just start talking. I mean, that's, bless his heart. Craig is a master at that. I mean, because he just, just a nice conversation, and things will start to come out. And so, oh, well, how did you do that? Oh, and how much of that was? Yeah. So that's my suggestion.
There's more to it than just the ingredients, and how to mix it and how to prep it. What I would like for everybody to be able to walk away with is the emotion, is the feeling, is the communication, is, you saw some of my grandmother, and that she communicated through making her biscuits in her cast iron skillet and her spittoon in the corner of the kitchen and those sort of things. Those are the things that weave together to make the story that makes us us. That is part of what made me me. And I was just fortunate enough to have a vehicle to be able to tell you all about it.
I'm sorry. None of the recipes are written down from my grandmother. It's all in my head, and I'm the person that people call to ask for that recipe for the macaroni and cheese. But I have started to put it down on paper for my children, though.
I think if you've missed a recipe, but you have an experience, you rebuild the recipe your way, or maybe even a new recipe, but you build the memory that you want to pass down. Like you take that experience, and even if you don't have the exact recipe, you develop something that you want to pass as a result of that experience. So you can relive it in a new way, and it's still just as important.
That's okay. I'll get Mr. Lumpkins. I'll be right over. No, go get. He said ladies first because he's a gentleman.
And thank you for your service also. I don't cook. When I was growing up, I was a tomboy, and my mother, I asked her one time, I said, why don't you show me anything? Because she showed me how to iron, wash and dry, clothes, do dishes, vacuum, never cooking. And I asked her why, and she said, well, you were having so much fun outside with your brothers, I didn't think you cared. But with this film, it was almost educational for me, especially when you were taking the meat out of that. Now, Franklin's told me about that because they sell grillers. And he told me you can get the meat out of the skin and, I'm not talking cooking stuff. I don't know any of that jazz. But I did get a lot from the macaroni and cheese and from everything that you were making, of course, Franklin's recipe and yours, and making the meatballs and everything. I thought it was fun. So that's just my take on it.
And maybe you'll be getting in the kitchen after that. So over to Mr. Lumpkins, who I know was mentioned in this film.
The lady who was talking about I guess you'd call them lost recipes. My mom wrote down nothing. She cooked by look, texture, and taste. And my lovely wife here, she made chicken pot pie. And she used Mama's recipe. And I told her, I said, it's good. But it's not Mama's. So I should have learned, but I didn't. So later on, she tried again. Same results. So one time when I made the remark, I said, babe, it's good, but it's not Mom's. She says, well, I'm not your mama either. So she had been sick, and our youngest daughter said that she was going to fix supper. So she went and talked to Mama. She come home, she made chicken pot pie. We sat down to eat, and I always called her Tanker. And I said, Tanker, without a doubt, this is the closest to Mama's chicken pot pie I've ever ate in my life. You done very good. Well, she went over and approached my mom and said, why did you give Tracy the full recipe and not me? Well, of course, Mama didn't have nothing written down. She forgot to tell her to put caraway seed in. That was the only difference, was the caraway seed. She makes Mama's chicken pot pie now. But that being said, when I come along, there was 11 of us children. The old house, no running water, bathroom down back. We pulled water out of the well. The house had 3 rooms downstairs, 3 upstairs. It was identical. And the biggest room in the house was the kitchen. It took up just about half downstairs. Mama had a table in there. You were welcome to be in the kitchen, but you'd better damn sight be sitting down out of her way. And that was basically the meeting place. And I guess I done kind of picked up on it because, well, Craig can tell you, when he comes by, we always sit at the kitchen table. But no, y'all done a great job. You brought back a whole lot of memories, good memories. And I thank you very much.
And I think your wife deserves a medal. I'm just going to say, you're still married after telling her that? Damn, I'm just saying. Oh my goodness, you are a patient woman. Oh my goodness. Oh yeah, don't you go and tell anything on her. Oh my gosh.
She worked at McCabe's Foodland. I used to stop in every evening. Pack of cigarettes and a bottle of beer. I agitated every cashier in there. So one evening in March, I went in and she was the cashier working. I picked up cleaning supplies. She said, man, what are you doing? I said, I got to clean my apartment up. I said, I'll tell you what, when you get off from work, stop by. You can do my dishes for me.
Oh my God. And she still talked to you? Holy cow.
Well,
That's not the answer.
She told me I was crazy as hell. She did dishes for no man. So I don't know why.
I like your wife. Yeah, I guess you. Obviously there was something there, man. I tell you. Were there any other questions? Anybody? Oh yes, we have one from Ms. Futrell.
Just one comment. Thank you so much. I sat here and went through all the memories from my growing up to, walking in my grandmother's kitchen and seeing this huge tongue boiling on the stove and going, no way, I'm out of here. To my grandson literally standing on my kitchen counter, helping, stir up the fruitcake for that year. To today, when I had a text message from my daughter and daughter-in-law saying, well, we're not doing Thanksgiving at your house this year, which is the first time in a very long time. But will you bring the cornbread? Will you bring the dressing? Will you bring, it was like, wait a minute, I have to haul all of this stuff. But it happens all the time. And then going back to the measuring thing, my son used to stand there and say, do you ever measure anything? And finally, my daughter-in-law, who couldn't even cook when she and my son were married, said, could you write it down? So I finally got into the habit of, before I threw something into a pot or a bowl or whatever, I would hold it in my hand and say, yeah, that's about right. And then I'd measure it. So I could write it down so that they could have it for future generations. And I keep it on a thumb drive. And so when I go to visit them, wherever they may live, I bring it with me. When they say, can you make, I pop it up on that. And then when they want a gift, I will run off several recipes from it and give them a copy of the thumb drive along with it. So it's a wonderful memory to continue going on. And thank you.
Any last words from any of our panelists? Any last words from Mr. Craig? With a
well, you've already seen it, but MPT will be showing this, a half-hour version of this, on the 23rd, the Saturday night before Thanksgiving, 7 o'clock. So you've already seen it. So you don't have to watch it again, but watch it again. And let MPT know how much you liked it. Because there's more that we can give them.
So to Lucille, thank you for believing in this project and putting it forward so it got funded and it was created. To our panelists and to Craig, you gave us a gift. You gave us a gift tonight. And what perfect right before Thanksgiving. How perfect was this? It was meant to be. So thank you for this gift to us during this holiday season. Thank you to all of you. Thank you for joining us tonight. Look forward to another phenomenal season next year. We'll have a schedule coming out. We hope you join us again. But for tonight, thank you for joining us. Good night, everybody.